All right, good to have you starting your week with me this week. We're gonna dive back into the Psalms this morning. Trying it on a different computer and camera, so I'm not sure how all this is gonna turn out. This one works a little different than the one I'm used to, but if you'll grab your Bible and look with me in the book of Psalms, I think this would be a good verse for us to get our week off and running with. We started looking at the 8th Psalm last week, and I think this Psalm is one more like what most of us think of when we think of the Psalms. It's just a song of praise and adoration. David is bragging on God. He's overwhelmed by the goodness of God. And so I said, this one is just a little bit more, I said, along the lines of what we expect, other than the phone ringing. A little bit more along the lines of what I think we expect in the book of Psalms. And so, if you got your place there, we're picking back up in the 5th verse, where David, again, we've just remind you of the setting. This is, don't know for sure, but it's almost, it's easy to imagine this psalm with David lying back on a hillside somewhere, tending to the flock, hands up behind his head, just looking up in the stars and talking to God. And that's kind of the setting. He's just spent some time to begin with talking about the wonder of just the very name of God, how He has chosen to be His servants. That when he looks around the world and realizes that God created it with just his fingers, it was not a strain on his resources. He is just amazed by that thought. He is amazed, and that verse 4 is one that just stands out when he says, "What is a man that thou art mindful of him?" Why would the God of this universe even consider man? And he kind of answers his own question here as he goes on. He says, "For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor." I've tried to keep most of these kind of light and not get in too deep, but I need to dig just a moment here for clarity's sake. When David says, "What is a man that you're mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visit him, for thou hast made him a little lower than the angels." And so there's a lot of debate. There's basically two camps of exactly what David is talking about here when he refers to the angels. That man is a little lower than angels. The word angel, the Hebrew word that is used there in that psalm, is the word we've talked about. It is the word Elohim. And the majority of the time that we see that word, it refers to God. But there are times, for example, Exodus chapter 22, verse 8, where the word is used to refer to other authorities besides God. Most people, I would say, believe, well, I won't say most. I'm going to say this is one of those where it's almost 50-50. Believe that that is the way what is meant here. That we should understand it as that man has been created just a little less than God, that we are created in His image, we are created in His likeness, and that we are as we are to rule over the rest of creation. The other way of looking at that word is just what it says. that it's translated as angels. And the reason for that, that some people stick with angel there, is because this verse is quoted later in the book of Hebrews, chapter 2. And there, again, that translation, it appears that they are referring to actual angels. And as humans, in one sense, I guess of the word, we are inferior to angels. We're inferior to angels, as commentaries say, in our knowledge and our power. But on the other hand, we have a relationship, the personal relationship. So it's kind of a dicey. I don't know that in the long run it makes too much difference, because I think what really matters is what he says about man in the next verse. In fact, you could look at that next verse and say that it points towards the translation as of God's, because he says that you have made him to have dominion over the works, and so you could make that argument there in that statement. But again, it's there are, this verse is one, to be honest, that causes some debate. The phrase "Son of Man" that is there, exactly what is that referring to? Who is that referring to? And so that verse, to be honest, I'm going to leave it more or less with that, because I think, again, what matters is that as we look at it, God has created man. And so then we move on to verse 6, and he says again to have dominion over the creation. And so David has leaned back. He has taken in the creation of God, the great creation that God has made. And he is now looking at the fact that God has given man the opportunity to have authority over this creation, this wonderful creation. As David looks at creation and looks how magnificent, how marvelous, how wonderful the creation of God is then he is amazed that we have authority over it. And I think most of us understand, run off on a little side trail here for a moment, is that with authority comes responsibility. That if we have been given authority, we also have responsibility. And I think one of the areas that I'm not the best at this, but one of the areas that I think as Christians we should be aware of is that God has given us dominion over this earth, and that we should be more environmentally conscious. We should be more conscious of the world around us, the world we're leaving our children. I'm not, again, a big environmentalist. I'll cut down a tree or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not an extreme environmentalist. You read stories of highways going unbuilt and those kind of things because they found some kind of rat or something running in a field. I build the highway. But I do think we have a responsibility to take care of the earth, to take care of the world. This is God's creation. And so just to get a little sidetrack there, that I think is important that we are that we're good stewards, not just of the money that we have, but of the resources. That our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, have water to drink, and that they have the resources that they need. And again, some people go completely out in left field on the environment. Some people don't care. They say, let it take care of itself. I think as believers, we need a balanced view of that. Of our earth again, this is the earth. If the Lord doesn't come, this is the earth our descendants are going to inherit, and they're going to want clean water, and they're going to want to be able to breathe clean air. And so, I think one of the things that would be important to David as he looked again, if we recognize this as the creation, I think it does change. We don't, throw our litter out the window. We don't, throw our cigarette butts out the windows. We don't go to the lake and throw our trash in the lake. Those those little steps, as we are. And again, I think that's all part of the Christian testimony as well, that we are aware of our environment. And so David says, you have given us, dominion over that, and you have placed us in that position as in this earth, that we are responsible for the planet that you have given us. Again, if we recognize this as being the creation of God. And so he goes on. He says, you've given us dominion over the works of thy hands, and put all things under his feet, all sheep, oxen, yea, the beast of the field, the fowl of the air, and the fish of the sea, and whosoever passeth through the paths of the sea. So our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. And so again, David again is just overwhelmed by the magnitude of the creation of God. And I think if you've been outside, if you looked out a window, we all can see that. The things that God is doing, the things that he has created are amazing. The work that God does all around us. And then he kind of gets to this last verse and kind of sums it up again as he says, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. And so he gives us this this bookends to this psalm. He ends it exactly the same as he began it. He is just, again, this whole psalm is one of being overwhelmed as he considered God, his love, his creation, his greatness. This is a psalm that I think all of us can join in singing as we consider our position in God's creation, his love for us. And we have the advantage that David didn't have of knowing, as Paul Harvey called it, the rest of the story. We have the New Testament that tells us ultimately of the love of God as he sends his son to us. And so again, I think it's important that he ends this psalm the same way that he ends it. It's almost like if you look at this, David begins by saying, oh Lord, how excellent is your name. He ends by saying, oh Lord, how excellent is your name. And then in the middle, he sets out to prove it. He has declared that God's magnificence, his excellence, and then in the middle of this, he set out to show you this is why I think God is excellent. He says, look at his handiwork, the works of his hand, but even greater than just the creation itself, God who created all these things, who created the universe, the stars, the millions, the billions of all those things, and placed each one of those things in his hands, He in all of that, He has placed man, and He loves us and cares for us. O Lord, how excellent is Thy name. Um, Again, we can, we look around, and like David, I think occasionally it would do us good to slow down, to stop for a moment, and do like David and just put our hands up behind our heads, lay down on a hillside like when we were kids, and stare up at the sky, and just remember the greatness of our God. That's really this psalm in a nutshell. David doesn't, again, it's what I think of when I think of a psalm. There are psalms that prophesy of the Messiah. There are psalms that describe David's depression. But when I think of psalms, like most of us, I probably think of the 23rd Psalm. And I think of the great songs of praise in the book. And this is certainly one of the greatest. And so I hope this week, as we're starting off a new week, maybe put some music to those words in your own in your own head, in your own heart. O Lord, how excellent is Thy name in all the earth, and Thou hast glory above the heavens. What a great way to start our week. Hope you have a good one. We'll see you here tomorrow.